Because what am I going to do? Is authentic being me, or do I have to look to all the rest of them, right? Because there's something we do in business. What did other leaders do to be successful? Well, maybe should I do the same? Ultimately, authentic is being true to who you are, what your values are, and what you want in life.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Ask Valor Masterminds Podcast, brought to you by Advanced Services and Fuse Networks. My name's Galen.
I'm Joe.
And we're coming at you from the Creative Block Studios in Seattle, Washington. So, Joe, for our new listeners and viewers kind of tuning in the first time, how did our podcast come to be?
Sure, thanks. So it first started out as a Facebook group page, and the purpose was to bring business owners together to kind of just talk to one another, ask questions, kind of help each other out in some sort of way as far as business goes. Because we're a marketing company, we get a lot of questions outside of marketing. So in a selfish way, we thought, what a great way to start a podcast to bring on different guest speakers to talk about different topics, all relevant to being in business.
And our guests, we truly reach a global audience. So what other better way to have a global international guest joining us? Joe, please introduce our guest today and our topic.
All the way from Denmark, we got T. Meyer. The topic is the art of being authentic, purpose versus goals. So Mark, welcome to the podcast first. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Can you please give our audience an introduction into who you are?
Yeah, sure I can. I am a trained therapist, psychotherapist, and I am a business coach. And I work with companies on authentic leadership. I do workshops on authentic leadership. I coach leaders and I coach professional athletes on finding their purpose. And then, as you mentioned, I am the author of the book, The Art of Being Authentic.
Sweet. So you mentioned athletes. So for our audience who's listening, are there any famous athletes you've worked with in Denmark that people may know of?
I work with a famous one championship fighter that I mention a lot because he's okay with it. His name is Nicholas Larsen. He's a 5-time world champion of Muay Thai boxing, and he's third ranked in his weight category in the one championship, which is an MMA mixed martial arts organization. I've worked with others too, but they prefer that I keep it private.
Awesome. So let's get to know you a little bit. We asked our guests the same question, so I'll ask the first one. Mark, what are some early lessons learned as an entrepreneur?
Well, some early lessons learned. I think that one of the most important lessons I've learned is a pretty basic lesson. And sometimes the basic is important, right? I mean, also when we talk about sports, athletes, they practice, and train the basic shots in basketball or the basic punches in fighting and so forth. And there's one basic but very important thing that I think has been an important lesson for me, and that is basically a 101 in business. Why are companies formed? Well, we form companies because we believe that if we go together, then we can create something that's better than we could on our own, right? So there's synergies to be made. 2 + 2 = 5 instead of 4. And in that sense, I think one of the most important things I've learned is it has never been my company when I've been at a company, whether I founded a company or I was the CEO of a company. It was never my company because the minute I decided to make a company, to start a company, I did it because I believed that together with others, we could do something that was greater than I could do on my own.
Right.
Nice.
Awesome.
So the next question, I love this one. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I think the best piece of advice I've been given was not a direct advice as such. And maybe that's because in my professional career, I haven't always been good at taking advice. So some of the lessons I've learned them indirectly, so to speak. And before I ended up doing what I'm doing now with therapy and coaching and authenticity, I was heading up a tech company. And we had a board meeting. And there was the chairman of the board, and the chairman of the board was representing the majority shareholders, and I, as the CEO of the company, was representing myself and other minority shareholders. And we were disagreeing, and we had this endless discussion going back and forth. And we weren't getting anywhere. So at one point, I looked at the chairman of the board, and I said, listen, you hold the majority. Why don't you just tell us how you'd like it done, and then we'll do it. And then the chairman looked back at me, and he said, no, Mark, I won't do that. I want us to agree. And in that moment, I was thinking, what's wrong with you, man? Just tell me what to do. You're calling the shots, and then I'll do it, and we'll disagree, and that's that. But he insisted, and we went on discussing for maybe 3-4 hours until we came to an agreement. I didn't understand it in a moment, and it wasn't a direct advice, but it didn't take long before I realized that was a very important lesson for me, because agreeing in a boardroom and agreeing with the people you work with is a tremendous foundation for working together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's almost like you're coming to a compromise to get to a solution, correct?
Yeah, and the thing when we sort of like try to overrule other people and say, well, I decide this is the way it's going to be. Well, people take note of that, right? And then they want to give you, then they want to pay back a little later, And that's not a good work. That's not a good working environment. This ended up being the best boardroom I've been a part of, because there was this respect. And what he did was basically, he brought some values that were important to him. It was a value that he wanted people to agree, and he brought that to the table, and it really made a difference.
Nice. So the last question. So technically, since we are a marketing podcast, a marketing company, why is marketing important to you?
Marketing is important, of course, as I assume a lot of your guests will say, is because, it doesn't matter who you are, or what your product is. If nobody knows about it, you're not going to get anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But it also ties into my work, which is authenticity. And being authentic is about being true to who you are, right? It's about standing out rather than fitting in. And in that way, it's a bit like marketing, right? You want your brand to stand out rather than to fit in, right? And in the same way, I say, well, you as a leader should do the same. You should stand out rather than fit in.
Awesome. Now we come to our part of our podcast, our A Advanced Services, Pump You Up Quote of the Day. So I read something on your Instagram, but before we go to that, I want to ask you right now on the spot, we'll do a quick change up. Is there a motivational quote that you like that is important to you when you wake up in the morning, you think of, or kind of a refocus quote, since the therapist in you lives inside your brain and there's the coach part in you? So it's an intriguing dynamic of a guest we have. So what is something that you could share with our audience that is a good motivational quote for you?
I think a good motivational quote for me is, I don't remember exactly who said it, or maybe it's just a saying. I think I saw it from a movie once, which is, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together, right? And that's actually something I think about a whole lot, because sometimes we can get caught up and we want to do things fast, but we always end up paying the price later, right? And that patience it takes to do things together, I remind myself I will reap the benefits later.
Right. And I think a lot of businesses do that when they make decisions fairly quickly to move whatever their product or service ahead. They end up taking steps backwards versus moving forward. So I think that absolutely applies. And go ahead.
Yeah, even especially also with small businesses, right? Because you get so caught up and you want things done, so it's easier to do it yourself, right? And then you end up in the do it alone fallacy, right? You end up having to do everything on your own, and it's not going to be sustainable, right?
Yeah.
No, but awesome stuff. So now is our Fuse Network's Did You Know segment.
Millions of cyber criminals are out there on a daily basis trying to steal your information. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Small businesses account for 58% of cyber attacks annually. So help your company fight cybercrime and mitigate risk by being proactive. Call Fuse Networks, your local Seattle IT experts at 206-701-6040 for a complimentary IT network and security assessment.
So I guess we'll see how this goes. But your book that you have, The Art of Being Authentic, I know you do workshops for businesses, and you mentioned you coach athletes too. But let's get into it. When we hear the word authentic as it applies to this, so what's the meaning of authenticity? Because I think people know what it means, but as it applies to business, give us kind of some insight on the lens that we should be thinking of that word today.
Yeah, and it's a really good question, because we use that word authentic because it's a buzzword. It's a word that a lot of people use, and we use it also in a lot of different ways, right? So when we talk about authentic, if I say, okay, well, the Mona Lisa is an authentic Leonardo da Vinci painting, you guys would agree with me. That's an okay way to use the word, right? It's an original, right?
Yes.
So I'll call it an authentic. On the other hand, if I asked you to describe an authentic Italian godfather, what would he look like? Then you'd probably say something like he would have a cigar and a tie and a suit and his hair back and whatnot, right? And the reason you describe him like that is because he looks like all the rest of them, right? So all of a sudden, we're using authentic to describe a copy. So we both use it to describe an original, but also use it to describe a copy. That can sometimes be a challenge when we are, in our businesses, in our small businesses or as leaders, because what am I going to do? Is authentic being me, or do I have to look to all the rest of them, right? Because there's something we do in business. What did other leaders do to be successful? Well, maybe should I do the same? Ultimately, authentic is being true to who you are, what your values are, and what you want in life. And that's what I advocate that we bring to our business, whether it's a small business or a big business. We have to bring our personal values to work.
So the second then, part of that would be, why is being authentic in your workplace important?
I think it's important equally in work and in life, because I think that it's the opposition between being who you are and wanting to live up to others' expectations. That sort of, it's that opposition that'll bring unhappiness, it'll bring inefficiency, it'll not bring anything good with you. I mean, I see it in my practice all the time. People are unhappy because they're living up to other people's expectations and not being true to themselves.
Yeah, I almost see that too with, like in social media is a good reflection of it. There's people who, there's their social media selves and then like their real selves, the side you want to show. And almost similarly with businesses too, they want to compete with being the best choice with whatever service or product they sell. So they try to do what everyone else does, but then it ultimately it's not sustainable, and you can't keep copying someone. That word authentic again, the authenticity is kind of lost. So it's like a false front, right? You paint what you want people to see, but that's not really, if you're painting, that's not the artist who you are. It's someone else's work you're trying to copy. So,
and there's very few with social media. There's very few people who, like the influencers, right? They're trying to portray an image to like who their audience is and who their audience wants them to be. And there's not very many people on social media anymore that are just who you see in social media is who you get out in the real world.
Right.
Exactly, yes. And that's important because, the reason why great things are achieved is because, people have a strong reason for doing what it is that they're doing. So we can't just emulate and copy and say, okay, I want my company to be a unicorn, right? Like there's something before that. There's something before I want my company to make money. And that is, what is the reason you're doing what you're doing? And you have to connect to that. Because in itself, it's not a driving force just to be a unicorn or just to make profit or just to do whatever else, social media or everyone else around you might expect of you.
And it's the why. Like, what is your why? And who's the author of that? Simon
Sinek?
Yes. His book is, I think it's, what's the title? What is your why? And it's why do you do what you do, whether it's in life or in business? And that holds true to also being your authentic self.
So talk to us about this, the psychological mechanisms behind authenticity. So for our audience, I can understand for an athlete, there's a big part of the mental focus, the mental performance side when you're performing at your highest level, how to do it. Some people may not equate that to business, but there's a side of it where you need to have those kind of things working, right, to bring your authentic self. Talk to us a little bit about that and how our audience, entrepreneurs out there, should maybe refocus or think about this.
Yeah, I think that ultimately what we're all searching for, whether we're building a business and we have goals with what we want to do with our, with our business, or if it's in our personal life, we want to express something of ourselves, some part of ourselves that we find to be authentic. And that's why it's important that we remember that. And sometimes when we're a small business or whatever, we're doing a career, we can sort of, in order to get to where we want to, we'll change a little bit. We'll compromise our authentic self a little bit because, we have to make things work out. And that's fair enough. But if we do it a lot of times, even though it's just a little bit, what happens is over time this accumulates. And you can compare it a little bit to a plane ride. If you want to fly from New York to Rome and half an hour into the flight, you change your course by 1 or 2 degrees, that's not a lot. But when you've been flying for 7 or 8 hours, you're going to be way off course. You're going to be nowhere near Rome. You're going to be near, Iceland or Greenland or something completely different, right? And I think that's important to remember as a business owner when you want to realize this company and you want to express something through that company, that you remember yourself, because small changes, if you don't course correct metaphorically, so to speak, you're going to end up 10 years from now in a place you didn't want to end up.
So talk to us now about the goals and purpose piece on how it impacts authenticity. That's really what we wanted to, Joe and I really were intrigued by the topic, having you on as a guest. When you set goals at the beginning of the year, your purpose in doing business, and now we're bringing to try to act authentic, with authenticity. How does that all tie together?
Yeah, this is an interesting part. And perhaps something that, the listeners will say, okay, I'm not used to hearing that, because we're in a society where we put a lot of emphasis on performance and goals. And also when you're in business, right? I know this from my past experience, we have goals and we have these goals that we need to achieve. Now, that is goals, we want to achieve things at the end of these goals. The thing with that is it's an ending. So in itself, it's meaningless, right? I mean, we think that things are going to change, but they're not really. An ending in itself doesn't really give any meaning to anything, right? I mean, you don't sit down and listen to the last 10 seconds of a new song, or you don't buy my book and read the last chapter. The endings in themselves, you don't go out hoping the DJ will play the best song at the end of the night, because all of those things do not really make sense in themselves.
Right.
So we need something more to our goals. We need something that can give meaning to our goals, and that is purpose. So purpose can give us a much stronger direction than a goal can give us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes we get a little, what are you telling me? My goals aren't important. I mean, they're giving me direction. I get up in the morning, I have these goals I have to achieve. Yeah, that's okay. I'm just saying you can have your goals, but you need to have your purpose first. You need to be sure why it is you're doing it. What is your motivation? What will come from it? What is it? What part of yourself do you want to express with this? And purpose is one of the greatest things we can give to ourselves, but also to our business. It helps our business a lot if we find out, why is it we're doing this? What is it we want to express with this? And if we do it right, then it can add a whole lot of meaning to the goals that we set.
So what do you say to those business owners, entrepreneurs out there coming off a pandemic? We had a lot of people pivot their careers that may have been longtime corporate people. And then the pandemic gave them an opportunity to find a new purpose, find a new career, start a new business. Because we've seen a lot of that with businesses that we've worked with. So when you're 10, 15, 20 years in the corporate culture, you've been told this is your purpose, that these are the performance standards you've been performing, then people may have been laid off or with intention started a new career. How do they refine that purpose when they've been drilled with this is what your what you've been taught to do or been paid to do, but their passion inside is like something else. Is there, when you work with businesses or even probably athletes too, how do you gonna refocus that or help them discover?
Yeah, I think that there are many ways. I think the first thing that we need to sort of think about is that, our purpose can usually be expressed in many ways and in many circumstances. So, of course, if you're at a job where you cannot express your purpose, okay, definitely I would say leave, get a new job immediately where you can express something that's authentic for you, right? But you can express a lot of your purpose in a lot of different, it's seldom the circumstances that do it. Usually it's yourself and your own fears of, saying, okay, this is what I want to do and this is what I want to be. If I usually say that if I was flipping burgers somewhere, I'd find some way to express my authenticity. I'd try to give those customers an extra smile, make their day happier, try to remember the names of the repeat customers and so forth, So I think that we should realize that it's seldom the circumstances that makes us be able to express our purpose. Many times it's how we, sort of go about it. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is if you made the decision to shift and you're in a new career, make sure you don't make the same mistake as you did in your corporate life if you stepped out on your own. Make sure that you don't go back to all those things that you ended up regretting, because that's a natural tendency. I do it too sometimes. I left my CEO world and my corporate career for doing therapy, for writing books, for doing coaching and working with companies. And sometimes I'd catch myself sitting with a spreadsheet thinking, okay, I could maximize profits on my book sales. And if I did this and I go into that modality of thinking, and then I have to stop and I have to say, okay, listen, Mark, why are you doing this? You're doing this because you want to help people become authentic. And if you lose that purpose any step on the way, then it's not worth it. What is all this been for, right? So we have to keep that in mind.
So is there a hack or something, an exercise you do to get back? Like you just said, you're going into spreadsheet mode. You have that modality that you remember from your previous life. Is there a trigger you have like, since you're a professional, I recognize I'm doing this, so I'll do this to kind of reset myself back to zero. Is there something that you do that you could share with our audience?
Well, it is reconnecting me with why you're doing things. I think there's some things you can do to sort of uncover your purpose. If you're uncertain, what is it really that I want to do? There's some things you can do. I think the first thing you could do is you could ask yourself the question, what if money was not an object? Now, I understand money is an object, but you could just ask yourself the question for the mental exercise, if money was not an object, what would I do? What would my life be like? Sort of see what kind of thoughts come to your conscious mind. And then you can step it up a bit. And you can say, what if there were no expectations in life? Then what would I do? Because a lot of things that keeps us from expressing who we really are is we're afraid of other people are going to judge us, right? So let's just pretend if there were no expectations in life. I didn't have any bills to pay, but I didn't have to worry about anything. There was no expectations. Then what would I do? And then maybe even step it up further and then say, what if everybody met me with a positive attitude no matter what I did? Then what would I do? If you start asking yourself questions like this, I know real life isn't like that. There's going to be judgments. Not everybody's going to meet you with positivity, right? But if you do it as a mental exercise, then that's a good way to sort of trying to connect with what is it you really want to do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You're finding your passion in life, correct?
Exactly. Spot on.
I'm going to change gears on you because you brought it up. And Galen talked about shifting careers, and you just mentioned shifting careers. What made you change from the CEO role into wanting to help more people?
Well, I describe it in the introduction of my book also. I went out into the world wanting to prove to the world that I was good, and probably ultimately I wanted to prove to the world that I was good enough, really. And the way I decided to do that was the typical way. I wanted a good career, I wanted to make a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. So when I was done with my MBA, I set up. First job I got, I was like, I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to make some results for this company, and I did, and it went really well for me, and I think I was in my early 30s when I was the Northern European director of a big UK-based online agency. I was heading up 3 offices in 3 different countries, had an apartment in Germany, Munich, and one in my native city of Copenhagen, and everything was good. There was something in me still, though, that wasn't really happy. I wasn't really content. I thought, I need more. So what did I do? I said, okay, I'm going to leave this job. I'm going to find some investors, and I'm going to start a tech company because I'm sure that what I need is my own company. Then I'm going to be happy. So I did that. We started a company. This tech company went really well. It won business awards. It won tech awards. Revenue skyrocketed. We were very profitable, and I basically achieved the goal I had set for myself. And still, I had that sort of like, there's something missing.
A yearning for something else, right?
You're yearning for more now. Now I'm in this modality of thinking, so I think, okay, I need a second company. So I started a second company. I ended up starting a third company as well, right? And in this whole process, I've been training as a business coach because I needed to perform. And I needed myself to perform, and I needed the staff to perform. So I'd taken a lot of business coach training.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, you know what? I'll train as a psychotherapist. Maybe this is what I'm missing. I was sitting some evening at home browsing the internet, and I saw you could train for 4 years. I remember I told my wife, I said, I'm going to train 4 years to become a psychotherapist. And she was like, what? You're going to do what? I mean, you get up at 6 a.m. every morning on weekends and you're working. I'm like, I was like, maybe this is what I need. And then I showed up for the first class in this psychotherapist training, and I hadn't really read the papers. And I showed up, and I read the papers, and it said I had to do 40 hours of therapy myself. And I was like, what's this? I'm not here to understand myself. I'm here to understand everyone around me, right? So I went up to the teacher and said, what's this? And she said, you have to do it. And it turned out it was the best thing that I ever did. And I ended up doing twice the required amount of therapy, because I realized that I've been chasing something outside of myself when I really wanted something inside myself, which was to express my authentic self. And the moment I realized that, okay, I have to help other people. I have to empower them also to be authentic, so they don't end up, chasing some arbitrary goal that's never going to bring them the satisfaction that they want.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, so you found it just almost through self-discovery. And you want to unlock that for the people that you work with then, right? So
yeah, definitely. And I think when we talk about marketing, it's we do we spend a lot of time trying to understand our customers. What do they want? What are their needs? Let's spend a little time also trying to understand ourselves, right? We owe it to ourselves.
Yeah.
So how does someone contact you? If someone's listening to this and, this is something that intrigues me, I want to get more information, what's the best way to contact you or, your company?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is to go to my website, which is tmarkmeyer.com. You can reach out to me directly if you want to work with me. I do online sessions as well, and I work with businesses all over the world. You can also sign up for some newsletters I have there on living authentically and on authentic leadership. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn. I talk a lot about authentic leadership on LinkedIn, and you're welcome to reach out. I would always answer my messages.
And then how do people find your book?
Yes, well, they go to the Amazon.com, I would suggest, and they search for The Art of Being Authentic by T. Mark Meyer.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you much, Mark, for joining us where you are in Denmark, literally across the world from us.
Yeah.
But on behalf of our sponsors, A Advanced Services and Fuse Networks, my name's Galen.
And I'm Joe.
Coming at you from the Creative Block Studios in Seattle, Washington. Thank you, everyone, for watching and tuning into this episode of the Ask Valor Masterminds podcast. Thanks, everyone.